In this video, let's see how can you get the Google or GitHub or any other login in your website. See, what happens is when you build an application, of course, you want to secure it. And one way to secure it is through the login forms. And normally what you do is when you say you are allowing your user to log in so that we can provide them the resource, you have to verify the username password from the database. And we have done that before, right? Now what I'm doing is, let's say you build an application and then with the username password, you also want an option of someone can log in through their Google account or their GitHub account. It will be easier for users to log in. And most of the time when I want to access any resource or any web application, I prefer to log in through Google. Now Google already knows a lot about me, right? They have all my information and I can use that. And they already have my username password. So what if this application can ask Google, hey, this person is claiming to be Naveen. Can you just confirm that he's Naveen? So that's how you basically verify. And to achieve that, what you can do is on your page, you can have a Google login or GitHub login option. And to do that, we'll build a very simple project. Let's not work with the older projects. Let's create a small project with a small resource. And let's see how do you provide the Google or the GitHub access to it. So the first thing I will do is I will create a new project. And to do that, I will go to start.spring.io. If you have ultimate version of IntelliJ IDEA.
Hey, we are talking about OAuth 2. Create a new providers level for, you can see I have a client run my application. If I didn't, but now a homepage when we visit /secured, the user will have
all STS. When watching this, you can just here, I want to create a project and I will say, make sure that this is Maven, a Java project, and the Spring Boot version latest is 3.3.2. Depending upon when you're watching this, you can just change it. And the group ID will mention is com.underscore. The project name I will make sure as OAuth 2. Now, why it is OAuth 2? Because if you want to provide this option of using someone else's authorization server to verify, we can use a protocol called OAuth. And the version is OAuth 2, so we'll use that. So we'll say Spring OAuth 2 demo, and the packaging will be jar. The Java version 21 on this machine. Let's add dependency. So when you say OAuth, you can actually create your own OAuth 2 server using Spring. But since we want to use some other services like Google or GitHub, we'll use a client there. But before we add that, we also have to make sure that we also get Spring Web and the OAuth 2 client. Now, of course, you might be saying we also need a Spring security, right? Because it's a login thing. The thing is, the OAuth 2 client itself will give you all the Spring security dependencies. So we just need the Spring Web and OAuth 2 client and click on because it's a login thing. The thing is, the OAuth 2 client itself will give you all the Spring security dependencies. So we just need the Spring Web and OAuth 2 client and click on generate. This will give you a project which you have to unzip it and open your IDE. So unzipping done. Let me go back to my IDE. This is the earlier project which we were doing for JWT. Will not touch it. I will click on open and let's open this new project. Click on open and okay. So first of all, I will just stop this server. Or maybe we'll just click on new window. Disconnect. Okay, sometime when you disconnect or terminate, it will not free up the port. I think it's with terminate. So let's see. I hope the port number 88 is available. Otherwise, we'll change it. So the first thing I want to verify if this is working. So I will just run this application to see what goes wrong. We have not done the mapping yet. No resource created. Let's run this and see what goes wrong. The moment you run this, it will give you some errors. Okay, first of all, it says the 800 port number is busy. Okay, that's the mistake, right? So for the older one, I should have stopped it. Do I have the option? No, it's closed. Okay, so what I can do is either I restart my machine. That's the solution I found. If you have other solution, let me know. I can just change the port number. I will say server.port equal to 8080, or maybe I will say 8000. Let's use port number 8000. Let's run this, and this time it should not give you this error of 8080 busy because we're using a different port number. Let's see. Okay, so it says Tomcat started at port number 8000. I'm happy. Okay, now let's create some resource. In fact, even before you go for the resource, let me just go to the page of, okay, not this port number. This was the earlier project. It's 8,000 enter, and it is giving you a login form. Go back to Spring Security, right? When you add Spring Security modules, it will give the login form, right? But hey, I don't want a login form. I want buttons here for the Google or GitHub. I don't have it. And even if you pass the username password, you don't know the username and password, right? Or maybe you will get it in your console. But if you scroll, you don't even have a password here. Okay, no problem. What I will do is I will create a simple resource which I want to access. So first of all, which resource I want to access, I will get a class, and this will be my hello controller. And I will make this as a REST client. So I will say REST controller. Not a client, REST controller. And let's create a method which will do something. So I will say public string. I know we are using the same method every time, but it works, right? And here I will say this is get mapping. This will be using the same method every time, but it works, right? And here I will say this is get mapping. This will be mapping for the homepage request. Or maybe I can specify some URL, or maybe homepage works. And here I will say return welcome to Telesco. I'll give a comma and I will say telesco.com. No harm in product marketing. Okay, what do you call this? There's a word for this, right? When you pitch in a product inside the script. I forgot what it's called. Doesn't matter. Okay, come back. So we are saying telesco.com, and this should work. So let's relaunch it. And actually, it will not work. The reason being, it will still ask you for the login form, right? And we don't want a login form. So if I go back and hit the homepage, it will again give you a login form. Now, how do you stop default configuration? So one way to do that is you have to do the Spring config. Okay. And still, if you want to see the homepage, what I will do is I will just go back to my POM file and I can disable it. So I can disable the Spring OAuth2 client. So what it will do is it will also disable the Spring security configuration. So let's go back to the browser and say refresh, or not for the login form. I will say enter. Okay, still giving me login form. Oh, I forgot to do one important thing. You have to reload your Maven before you do that. Let's restart. Go back to the browser. I don't want a login form before you do that. Let's restart. Go back to the browser. I don't want a login form now. Enter. Okay, it's not ready yet. So you can see it says welcome to telesco.com. So we are happy. And now let's enable it. Again, let's reload the Maven changes. I want to pass the security. So we have done that before. So if you want to pass the default security, what you can do is you can create your own config file. And I will name this as security config. And on top of this, you will say this is configuration, and also enable. What you can do is you can create your own config file. And I will name this as security config, and on top of this you will say this is configuration, and also enable web security. And then you have to just change one method. Basically, you have to create one bean, and I want a bean of security filter chain. So I'll say public. I want the method which will change the behavior of security filter chain. I will have a default name, security filter chain, and this should take an object of HTTP security. I will say HTTP. This might throw an exception, the method I'm going to do. So I want to basically return HTTP.build. So this build will return the object of security filter chain, and this might throw an exception. So I will just say add throws exception. Okay. Now, if you want to change the configuration, in fact, we have done this before, right? What you have to basically do is with the object of HTTP, you have to add certain things. In the previous sections, we have talked about how do you disable the CSRF, how do you work with a custom login, authentication, but this time we don't want to do all those stuff. We just want a Google login, right? So what you can do is you can use HTTP dot. First of all, I want to make sure that all the requests should be authenticated. So I will say authorize request. If you don't do this, it will bypass security and you will be able to access resource. I don't want to bypass security. I want to restrict it. So I will say auth dot any request will be authenticated. By default is permit, but I want to make it authenticated. Now by doing this, it will restrict you to access a resource. But with the restriction, I also want to give them the access of login through Google. So I will say HTTP dot, or maybe I can simply use the builder pattern. I will just enter this, and instead of having a semicolon here, so now we'll say dot, and there's an option of OAuth2, and we have to specify we are going for a login, and login with customizer dot with defaults. And that's it. It's so simple, right? Now, by doing this, you are making sure that you are specifying that, hey, I want to use OAuth2 for the login, and this should work, and it will. You know why? OAuth2 login, right? But in this world, Google is not the only OAuth provider. There are a lot of different servers using which you can do that. Maybe you can create your own servers. How? I mean, nowhere we are specifying that we have to use Google login. And that's what it is complaining about. If you say it says parameters 0 of method, set filter chain, blah, 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 web security configuration required, the OAuth2 registration, so that is not found. So the repository is not there. So that means we have to pass which login you want to go for. Okay, and that you can do in the configuration. So you can go to your application properties, and this is where you can mention those properties. So what are the properties? Of course, you don't have to by heart this. You can just get it from Google. So you can say spring.security. We want to work with OAuth2, and we are specifying the clients here, and we have to do the registration. That's what it was saying in the console. And then we have to specify which server we are using. So we are using Google here. So for GitHub, it will change to GitHub. And you have to specify two things. One is the client ID, and then you have to specify the client secret as well. So client ID is something which people can see, but client secret is only developers can secret. So I will just copy paste here, and I will say client secret. This is like more like a password, or maybe you can think about username password if that makes sense. But the question is, from where exactly I will get this client ID and client secret? Now these are the steps you have to do. So what I will do is I will go back to my browser. You can do that. Maybe you can create your own servers, make it authenticated. Now by doing this, it will restrict you to access a resource. But with the restriction, I also want to give them the access of login through Google. So I will say HTTP dot, or maybe I can simply use the builder pattern. I will just enter this, and instead of having a semicolon here, so now we'll say dot, and there's option of OAuth2, and we have to specify we are going for a login, and login with customizer dot with defaults. And that's it. It's so simple, right? Now, by doing this, you are making sure that you are specifying that, hey, I want to use OAuth2 for the login, and this should work, and it will not. You know why? Because we are saying OAuth to login, right? But in this world, Google is not the only OAuth provider. There are a lot of different servers using which you can do that. Maybe you can create your own servers. How? I mean, nowhere we are specifying that we have to use Google login. And that's what it is complaining about. If you say it says parameters 0 of method, set filter chain, blah, 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 web security configuration required, the OAuth2 registration. So that is not found. So the repository is not there. So that means we have to pass which login you want to go for. Okay, and that you can do in the configuration. So you can go to your application properties, and this is where you can mention those properties. So what are the properties? Of course, you don't have to by heart this. You can just get it from Google. So you can say spring.security. We want to work with OAuth2, and we are specifying the clients here, and we have to do the registration. That's what it was saying in the console. And then we have to specify which server we are using. So we are using Google here. So for GitHub, it will change to GitHub. And you have to specify two things. One is the client ID, and then you have to specify the client secret as well. So client ID is something which people can see, but client secret is only developers can see, or people who are building this. So I want the same thing, but with the client secret. So I will just copy paste here, and I will say client secret. This is like more like a password, or maybe you can think about username password if that makes sense. But the question is, from where exactly I will get this client ID and client secret? Now these are the steps you have to do. So what I will do is I will go back to my browser. So search for Google Cloud Console, and go to this website, and this is where you can get it. So if you see there's an option of API and services, if you click here, I want to create a new credential. So this is the basically API services from Google Cloud, and you need a developer account for that. So make sure that in your personal account, you have a developer account. Go to credentials. And if you don't have a consent screen by default, it will give you some issues. So make sure that if you're doing this for the first time, it will give you a consent screen. Just make sure that you complete it. It's a form which you have to complete where you specify your app and stuff. So do that. And then you will see this option. Otherwise, click on, if it is already there, you can click on credentials and click on create credentials. And then we are creating a OAuth client ID. Click on this. Now this will ask you for the application type. Now you can build, you can get your client ID for web application, for the Android, for the Chrome extension, iOS, and blah, blah, blah. There are so many options here. I want to go for the web application, so I will choose that. Next, I want to specify the name. I will say test app, if that works. Yeah, test app. And then we have to specify the authorized redirect URL or URI. And here you have to mention http:// localhost 8080. This is your browser name or the whatever URL you have. Oh, sorry, not 8080, it is 8000 / so you have to say login / OAuth2 / code / Google. Now again, you don't have to buy this. You can also get it from Google if you search, and then you have to click on create. So if you have your website already deployed, you can use that URL instead of the localhost 8000. Now, once you do that, it will give you two things. It will give you client ID and it will give you client secret. So I will just copy this and put it somewhere. So I will say client ID is this, and then I have to specify the client secret, and that is this. So you can just copy this and make sure that you don't share this with anyone. You can see that on the screen is because once the session gets over, I will delete those two things. I will delete this particular API. Okay. And now I can use these two things. So I can just copy this client ID and go back to your IDE, not the database, IDE, and paste the client ID. Then you have to specify the secret, which is here. I'll just copy this and paste it here. That's it. These are the two things you have to specify. And once you do that, let's restart the application, and hopefully this will work this time. It should not give you those error. So you can see there's no error, but let's verify if this is working. So let's go back to our browser and localhost 8080. I will say enter, and you can see it is giving the option of login directly. Normally it should give you an option of, there should be a button. Okay, not 8080. Okay, there should be a button of Google and then it should give you this. I'm not sure why it is directly going this. Maybe I will just add one more so that, when you have your own UI, you can customize the way you want. But yeah, it gives you a button, and then when you click on it, and let me know if it is happening with you as well in the comments. And you can choose your email account and you can log in now. Example, if I choose my personal email account, it will say, okay, I want to give the access, continue. And now I'm logged in, and you can see we got welcome to Disco.com. Now I don't have to log in again. Every time I go this, it will use that token from given by Google, and it will log in. Okay. So that's one. This is for the Google. What about GitHub? Same thing for the GitHub also. Let's copy these two things and paste. The only change you have to make here is GitHub and GitHub. Okay. Now this client ID and secret key will not work. We have to change this as well. Okay. Now from where you will get this? Only same thing for the GitHub also. Let's copy these two things and paste. The only change you have to make here is GitHub and GitHub. Okay. Now this client ID and secret key will not work. We have to change this as well. Okay. Now from where you will get this? Of course, the way we got it from Google, there should be option of GitHub as well. So if I go to GitHub, this is my repository. If you're not following yet, do that. And if I go back, I have to log into my GitHub. Let's do that. So basically, I've also enabled the two-factor authentication on my GitHub. Let's do that. So basically, I've also enabled the two-factor authentication. I can use authorization app, or I can use a passkey from my Mac. Okay, I'm logged in. Okay, once you're logged in, you can just go to this and click on settings. And once you come on this page, just scroll down at the last, not this much last, click on the developers setting. And you can see there's an option of OAuth apps. Already have one. Maybe you will see an option of there's no apps available. You can click on new OAuth app and give a name. I will again go for test app. The home URL I'll mention is this. I don't want to specify any description, but URL, the callback URL is important. The same way we have done it for the Google, we'll do it here. So http://localhost:8000/login/ okay, it's already giving me option here. We have this given now. Say there's an option of OAuth apps. Click on new is important here and click on register here and the secret. Okay, so secret, how will you get it? Now you can see it is not showing anything. So I will click on generate a new client secret, and I got it here, and I'll paste it here. That's it. These are two things I have to mention: the client ID and the client secret. By doing those things, let's restart the application and let's go back to the browser. Again, the same page, enter. Okay, now you can see we got two options: the Google login or GitHub login. We tried for Google, let's try for GitHub now. Click on this. It says, since I'm already logged in on GitHub, it says authorize now and ready. Yes, click on this. And I'm logged in. And now it says, welcome to Discord. So it's so easy to get the logins, right? And yeah, that's how basically you log in through your OAuth 2 clients. You can click on this. It says, since I'm already logged in on GitHub, it says authorize now and ready. Yes. You can see we got welcome to Discord.com. Now I don't have to log in again. Every time I go this, it will
their username and password to be able to view that. But we to say what OAuth 2 clients we're going to support, or what OAuth 2 providers. So if I go into application.properties, I can fill in some properties. So I can set up, let's just say for this example, we're going to set up a GitHub login, and we'll set up a Google login. So one other kind of hack that I love is anytime I'm working with Spring Security, I like to set the logging level for org.spring talk about OAuth 2 apps. So you see I have a callback URL. So this is something like Google Security, we get to, so that's why it shows me the form for Google page. I'm going to console.clocks with Spring Security, that, and I'm forward on. So Google, you will want to go over to console, which was .google. If you want to dig down and this secured, we are now given two options. So we can log in with GitHub, or we can log in with Google. So now I'm going to try Google. Here are my different options for my Google account. I'm going to sign in with that. And as you can see, I am taken to the secured page. All right, thanks for sticking around to the end of that tutorial piece. I'm going to say, okay, OAuth 2, and I'm going to say equal to, and then we'll go back over here.
What's going on? Okay, or Postman or whatever. So this is the first step. Then the browser, you will check. So actually this is not happening 100% on the browser side, but the So GitHub, and you can create API keys, service accounts, automatically redirected to the login page. Why? Here it will be hello from secure endpoint. All right. API / security password, and if you go back to the browser, here you use user as a username and paste that password, sign in, and here you see that we have configuration, and here it's gonna claim to understand that we want to use the OAuth 2 login form or OAuth 2 login. We need to specify it. Okay, and here we have this option. All right, now let's case Git, but I will tell you this, that we do that all this, that we are performing a call to our client ID that we have in our code right here. Let me navigate authorization. So now configuration, you don't need to provide any configuration, which is a map of string and registration, and this is the string right here, and the map or the value of this registration. Also, we don't have the builder. Here we have the scope is default implementation and default configuration for us. So here at the same